Howdy folks, and welcome to Garage Reviews with Spiral Tarantula. Happy Update 2.1. It's Tank Destroyer weekend here on World of Tanks, and I think it's only appropriate to talk about the Tier 4 German tank destroyer, the Hetzer. This is the only Tier 4 tank that I have repurchased. In my personal opinion, most of the Tier 4 tanks are absolute garbage for all the nations, the Hetzer being one of the few exceptions. This tank has probably the highest camo rating out of any of my tanks in my garage, including my light tanks. The camo rating on this tank is absolutely insane. I've had heavy tanks get to 20 meters in front of me and they could not see me when I was concealed behind a bush. I wasn't firing at them, obviously, but the camo rating on this thing is insane. As I've said, it's the only Tier 4 tank I've had. I don't really care much for the other Tier 4 tanks. But if you plan on getting a Tier 4 tank and keeping it, I would highly recommend the Hetzer. It's a great little tank. It's got great maneuverability. Armor-wise, it has basically paper skin, in my opinion. But let's look at the stats a little bit more closely. There are actually two upgrades you can put on this thing to max it out. One has got the little snub nose 105mm derp gun. I don't use that. I use the 75mm gun. It's a lot more accurate. The fire rate's a lot quicker. And I just prefer it when you're fighting higher tier tanks. Sure, the little snub nose 105mm gun does a lot more damage, but the penetration is only 64mm, and that just doesn't do it for me. What's really striking about this tank is the traverse speed, 44 degrees. That's insane for a tank destroyer, but it's a Tier 4 and it's an extremely light tank destroyer. As I mentioned, it's got extremely high camo rating, so I wanted to maximize that potential for it to be a little hidden secret sniper to take pot shots at enemies, so I stuck a camouflage net on there. Gun rammer, it does have good reload speed, but I always stick a gun rammer on there. Anything to maximize DPM is always good. And I put a binocular telescope. You'll be sitting in bushes, you'll be sitting in cover a lot in this tank, not moving. So a binocular telescope isn't a terrible idea for equipment. Excuse me. Okay, so let's look at the armor on this thing. As I said, it's nothing too insane. 60mm on the front, but that is sloped armor. So if you angle correctly, or if you're fighting tier 2s or some very the unupgraded tier 3s, you could potentially bounce shots. I wouldn't recommend that. This tank is not designed to bounce shots. On the sides 20mm and on the rear 8. Basically nothing on the sides and the rear. Anything can get through you on the sides and the rear. So if you're looking to take hits from enemies, overall I think this thing could take maybe about 2 or 3 hits and survive. Weaknesses, huge glaring weakness there on the front, the lower plate. That's the curse of the German tank line, to be honest with you. A lot of the German tanks had frontal transmissions on the frontal lower plates, and they would get engine fires, or they would just flat out be unable to move because it destroyed the transmission. As I'm panning the camera around, you can see on the sides and the rear, pretty thin armor. It's basically sheet metal. Honestly, anywhere on the sides and the rear getting hit will penetrate this tank. And if you do get hit on the front, that little viewport, that's a weak spot on the front, but most people are going to be shooting your lower plate. Crew skills, I don't have much on this tank. I'm only about halfway through camouflage, but after I complete camouflage, I would recommend green thumb. Probably situational awareness. I think there's a couple more on here. Silent driving would be a good choice. Maybe Deadeye. Muffled shot, definitely. Anything to conceal you or keep your camo rating as high as possible for most of the battle. But I haven't played too many Tier 4 matches. Alright, summing things up, I would definitely recommend this tank to actually even beginner players. The thing that frustrates me with the Hetzer is a lot of people will rush the enemy positions with this tank, and with the very, very thin armor, that is not an optimal solution. Most tank destroyers you don't want to rush. You want to sit behind enemy lines, sit in the bushes, and let them come to you. Playing this game as long as I've had, there are a lot of stupid people that will just bum rush you and get themselves killed.